Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepless Scientist, a quiet place in the cosmos where your thoughts can unwind and knowledge becomes a soft lullaby for the night. Tonight's journey will take us somewhere silent, somewhere cold, somewhere few humans have ever seen, and even fewer truly understand. Beneath the waves, and beneath even that, far below the last glint of sunlight, beneath the glimmer of plankton and the paths of migrating whales, there lies another world. Not above us in the stars, but below, within the planet itself. A realm older than memory, darker than sleep, and deeper than dreams. We're heading into the deep sea. But before you settle in and get cozy, I'd love if you could take a moment to like this video and subscribe. Only if you truly find these quiet explorations enjoyable. And when you're ready, leave a comment to let me know where in the world you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. It's always such a joy to see all the places we gather from, each in our own little slice of time. Now feel free to dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for a soft background hum, and let's gently begin our journey into the deep sea together. And if your mind begins to wander, that's perfectly fine. Let it drift. We'll still be here, quietly unfolding the story. Let's begin at the edge of everything we can see. If you've ever looked out over the ocean and felt small or quiet or strange in your own skin, you're not alone. The ocean has a way of whispering truths we didn't know we were holding. Its surface may glitter with sunlight, but that glint is a distraction, a beautiful mask hiding something far more immense and unknowable beneath. More than 70% of the Earth is covered in ocean, and of that, more than 80% remains unexplored, unseen, and unmapped. We know more about the surface of the moon than we do about the world beneath our waves. You might picture the ocean as a single body of water, a vast blue bowl, but the truth is stranger and far more beautiful. The ocean is layered, like a dream, with deeper and deeper meanings the further you go. The topmost layer, the epipelagic zone, is the one we know best. It stretches from the surface down to about 200 meters, and it's where nearly all ocean photosynthesis occurs. Sunlight reaches here, and so does life in its colourful, chaotic form. Schools of fish, coral reefs, playful dolphins, hungry sharks, and curious humans with their masks and flippers. It's a world full of motion, sound, and light. But it's also shallow in the grand scheme of things. Shallow like a whispered thought that disappears before it finishes forming. Below that lies the mesopelagic zone, from 200 to 1,000 meters. It's often called the twilight zone. Not the eerie TV show, but the real one. Light begins to fade here, dissolving into blue and grey until the darkness wins. The creatures here are different. They glow in the dark. They see upward, not forward. They feed on the rain of organic material that drifts down from above. Dead plankton, fragments of jellyfish, bits of life too small to name. Below that is the bathypelagic zone, sometimes called the midnight zone. From 1,000 to 4,000 meters, this region is utterly dark. Not metaphorically, but literally. No sunlight reaches this far. The darkness here isn't just an absence of light. It's a presence. It has weight and quiet and substance. The creatures of this depth have adapted in ways that seem pulled from science fiction. Transparent skin, mouths too wide, eyes too big, or no eyes at all. Some flash like broken stars. Some drift like living ghosts. Others wait still and silent, mouths open for a meal that might never come. The ocean gets deeper still. From 4,000 to 6,000 meters lies the abyssopelagic zone, the abyss. The temperature here hovers just above freezing. The pressure is immense and the landscape is barren. No coral, no kelp, no sand that feels warm beneath your feet. Just darkness, silence, and the slow drift of time. And then, even deeper, the hadalpelagic zone, named after Hades, the Greek underworld. These are the ocean's deepest trenches, down to 11,000 meters. The Mariana Trench, the Kermadec, the Philippine Trench. These are places where tectonic plates grind, where the crust of the Earth folds in on itself. They're among the most remote and extreme environments on the planet, and yet life exists there too. Tiny, strange, resilient. It's easy to think of the deep sea as a graveyard, but it's not. It's not a void or a failure of life to thrive. It's something else entirely. It's a different kind of aliveness, one that doesn't flash or bloom or call out, but one that endures, quietly, powerfully, patiently. There are creatures in the deep that have never known sunlight. There are species that have not changed in tens of millions of years. There are microbes that survive in boiling black plumes beside underwater volcanoes, and fish with antifreeze in their blood. There are worms that feed on hydrogen, sulfide and shrimp that glow like small swimming lanterns. And the most remarkable part, we've barely scratched the surface. Only about 5% of the seafloor has been mapped in high resolution. Most of our knowledge of the deep sea comes from brief glimpses, snatched by remote-operated vehicles or submarines, or occasionally from strange creatures washing up on shore. Every expedition uncovers something unexpected. A new species, a new behaviour, a new way of being alive. So tonight, we'll descend. Not to conquer, not to take, just to witness. Quietly. We'll drift layer by layer, pressure by pressure, down into that great aquatic cathedral where time slows, light changes its meaning, and every breath is a kind of echo. Along the way, we'll meet beings you've never imagined. We'll listen to the darkness. We'll explore the heat that lives inside the cold. And we'll discover the many ways life whispers even when the world is silent. No need to hold your breath. You're not diving, you're just listening. Let your body soften. Let your thoughts spread out like silt in water. The surface world can wait. The deep is calling. Let's go. There's a moment, just as you begin to sink below the surface of the ocean, when everything changes. The sunlight bends and flickers above you like the last pages of a story being gently turned by an invisible hand. The world you came from, dry, noisy, gravity-bound, recedes into shimmer and distortion. And then, as your body drifts downward, a new sensation begins. A weight you can't quite feel, but that you absolutely know is there. A slow, steady pressure, building. If you've ever swum down a few meters and felt your ears start to press in, that was just the beginning. At a mere 10 meters deep, about the height of a 3-story building, the pressure around you has already doubled. For every additional 10 meters you descend, the ocean adds another atmosphere of pressure. It's relentless, invisible, and absolute. There are no exceptions, no hiding from it. It presses in from all directions, perfectly equal, perfectly constant. At 100 meters, it's 10 times what you're feeling right now on land. At 1,000 meters, it's 100 times more. And at the deepest known part of the ocean, the Challenger, deep in the Mariana Trench, the pressure reaches over 1,100 times that of the surface. That's more than 16,000 pounds per square inch. Imagine 50 fully loaded jumbo jets balanced on your body, all at once, and you still wouldn't quite capture the intensity of that crushing force. And yet down there life exists. But let's not rush. Let's slow ourselves and imagine the descent, not as a fall, but as a surrender. You're not diving. You're being drawn downward, gently, as if gravity has grown quiet and persuasive. Your ears adjust, your breath feels farther away, and everything around you begins to still. The water grows colder. The light slips into blue, then fades entirely. There is no horizon anymore, only this velvet darkness stretching endlessly in every direction. You're no longer sinking through water exactly. You're being folded into the body of the earth. At these depths, pressure is not just a number. It is a condition of existence. For us surface creatures, pressure is subtle, background noise. We live at the bottom of our own shallow sea of air, a single atmosphere pressing on us from all directions. It's so constant, so familiar that we forget it exists. But for deep sea life, pressure defines every moment, every movement, every adaptation. No air-filled lungs, no delicate bones, no hollow chambers or brittle structures. Down here life is soft, not weak, never that, but flexible, resilient, designed not to resist pressure, but to yield to it, to become part of it. Many deep-sea creatures have no swim bladders, the air-filled sacs that fish use for buoyancy in shallower waters. At great depths, such structures would collapse or explode. Instead, these animals rely on oils, gels, or tissue density to float just right. Others have bodies composed almost entirely of water, matching the ocean's density so closely that they hover as if suspended in a dream. Some, like the eerie and wonderful Hadal snailfish, live deeper than any known vertebrate. These pale, ghost-like beings drift along trench walls at depths of over 8,000 metres, where the pressure would crumple a human-made submarine like paper. But they're unbothered. Their bodies are gelatinous and oddly beautiful, with skin that looks more like tissue paper than armour. Their bones are so reduced they barely qualify as bones at all, more cartilage than calcium. Their enzymes, the microscopic engines of life, are pressure-resistant, fine-tuned over millions of years to work not in comfort, but in compression. And still, they move, they feed, they breed, they glide in silence across a world shaped entirely by pressure. They don't resist it, they embody it. Pressure in this realm is not an enemy. It's not a force to be escaped or overcome. It is the architecture of reality, the scaffolding around which all else is built. You might expect that such an environment would breed panic or urgency. But what we find instead is patience. Motion here is slow, deliberate, measured not in flurries but in drifts. Even the fastest predators among the deep move with an eerie calmness, as if time itself had thickened. There's something poetic in that. We often equate intensity with speed, strength, impact. But in the deep, intensity is expressed as stillness, as density, as quiet. The pressure down here is not loud. It does not scream. It hums. And that hum, if you listen closely, is not terrifying. It's grounding. In the deep, silence has weight. Stillness has texture. Even the water feels heavier. Not because it's denser, but because everything is. It's not empty space. It's filled with the soft pressure of 1 billion tons of history, memory, and unseen motion. It's a library with no books but endless pages. You may be wondering, how do we know this? How do we measure pressure in places we've barely touched? The answer, as always, is slowly. We lower probes, sealed reinforced cylinders filled with sensors, on impossibly long cables. We send down robotic submersibles, their frames reinforced with titanium and carbon composites, designed to withstand the bone-crushing force that nature imposes at these depths. And even then, equipment has failed, crushed, imploded, lost. The pressure does not negotiate. It welcomes only those who are shaped by it. And so, life below must be different. Not just in form, but in philosophy. It cannot rush. It cannot fight. It must adapt. Not in years, but in eons. Generations folding into generations, each reshaping the body slightly, until one day, what once was fragile becomes inevitable. That's what pressure does. It doesn't simply test you. It remakes you. Perhaps that's why we find something comforting in imagining these depths. Because in a way, they remind us of the quiet truths of our own lives. That resilience often looks like stillness. That strength can be soft. That survival is sometimes the art of yielding without breaking. So as we continue our descent, remember, each metre deeper is another atmosphere added, another layer of silence, another measure of time pressed into form. We're no longer falling. We're becoming part of something heavier, something deeper, something vast enough to carry the weight of the world without saying a word. Let yourself drift in that weight for a moment longer. The surface is gone. The pressure is all around you now, but here, in the deepest dark, the world doesn't end. It begins. If the deep sea were a book, pressure would be the ink, unseen, but forming every letter of every sentence. It's easy to imagine that nothing could live down here, in this immense and silent place where the ocean presses in from all directions like a sleeping giant's hand. But life, as it always does, has found ways to not only endure, but to shape itself around the very things we might think would make life impossible. Let us look more closely. Imagine a creature floating gently, as if suspended not in water, but in the memory of water. It has no scales, no hard bones, no air-filled cavities to betray it to the crushing weight of its world. It is pale, nearly translucent, with eyes so soft they seem to catch shadows rather than light. This is the Hadal snail fish, and it is one of the deepest living vertebrates ever discovered. Found as deep as 8,000 to 11,000 metres in the darkness of the Mariana Trench and other trenches like it, the snailfish seems more like a suggestion than a solid animal. It is in many ways a ghost, except it is very much alive. Its body is built not to resist pressure, but to move with it. Bones, for example, are a liability at these depths. The usual calcium-based structures that support most vertebrate life would become brittle, or collapse entirely under intense compression. The snailfish instead has a skeleton that is barely a skeleton, soft, cartilaginous, almost gelatinous in places. Its bones are reduced and its skull flexible. It has traded rigidity for resilience, and in doing so it thrives in places we once thought were sterile voids. Its enzymes, the molecular tools that allow it to digest food, generate energy and keep its body running, are also specialised. Most enzymes would fold incorrectly or stop functioning entirely at such high pressures, but not these. These enzymes contain extra stabilising structures that keep them working in the crushing depths, like tiny machines lubricated for a world without forgiveness. And what about buoyancy? In shallower fish, buoyancy is often managed with swim bladders, balloon-like sacs that can expand or contract with gas to keep the fish at the right depth. But gases are unpredictable under pressure. A balloon that works perfectly at 100 metres will implode at 1,000. And so, deep-sea animals like the snailfish have no such sac. Instead, they use oils, soft tissue densities, and specialised gel-like substances that do not compress. These materials offer a kind of permanent balance, a floating neutrality that lets the fish hover where it needs to without risking collapse. But the snailfish is not alone in its quiet mastery of pressure. There's the giant amphipod, a crustacean that looks like an armoured shrimp, scaled up to the size of a dinner plate. It too is found in the Hadal zones, scuttling across the seafloor or drifting in near-total darkness. Its exoskeleton is infused with aluminum extracted from seawater, a natural adaptation that scientists still don't fully understand, but that seems to give its body unusual flexibility and resistance to deformation. It is like armour made of memory foam, protective, but not brittle. Or consider the deep-sea anglerfish, with its grotesque grin and dangling bioluminescent lure. Its body is a study in surrender. Its flesh is soft, almost floppy. Its stomach can stretch to accommodate prey larger than itself, a necessity in a world where meals are rare and must never be declined. In the female, the jaws are enormous, hinged and unhinged in a way that seems to break rules entirely. And the male? Well, the male is something else altogether. In some species, the male fuses permanently to the female's body, becoming little more than a parasitic pair of gonads. It is strange, yes. But in the deep sea, strangeness is often just another word for efficiency. All of these creatures have one thing in common. They do not try to fight the pressure. They do not oppose it. They dissolve into it. They are built not for defiance, but for coexistence. Their strength lies in how well they yield, and perhaps that's the lesson the deep wants to offer us. Because when we speak of pressure, we often imagine it in human terms: stress, deadlines, the weight of responsibility. We picture something bearing down on us from above, something we must hold up or be crushed by. But in the deep sea, pressure is not stress. It is the environment. It is the air, the water, the constant embrace of everything that surrounds you. You cannot escape it, but you can become part of it. The snailfish is not stressed. The amphipod is not overwhelmed. The anglerfish, despite appearances, is not anxious. They have all learned to shape themselves around the weight of their world, to soften their edges, to distribute the load, to breathe in a place where lungs do not work, and to float where sinking would be easier. Even time behaves differently down here. These creatures do not rush. Their metabolisms are slow. Their heartbeats, if they have them, are gentle. Their reproductive cycles can stretch across years. A single event, a mating, a feeding, a drift toward new territory, might be the only thing that happens for a very long time. They are not in a hurry. They don't need to be. The deep does not reward speed. It rewards stillness. It rewards endurance. It rewards the kind of adaptation that takes generations to build and moments to appreciate. You might think of the deep sea as empty, but you'd be wrong. It's full. Full of pressure. Full of presence. Full of forms that do not rise to meet your expectations because they have never heard them. The deep is not shaped in our image. It does not resemble us. But that doesn't make it less alive. If anything, it makes it more so. Because life down here has made peace with gravity, with darkness, with cold, with silence. It has made peace with being unnoticed. It has learned to carry weight not as a burden, but as a nature. And in that peace, in that slow, gelatinous, glowing, drifting peace, there is something profound. Stillness, it turns out, is not the opposite of life. It is simply another way of being. So the next time you feel weighed down, when pressure feels unbearable, when the world seems to press in from all directions, remember the snailfish. Remember the soft-boned, glow-eyed, translucent little creature that lives in a place where every square inch is squeezed by unimaginable force, and that thrives not in spite of it, but because of it. Yielding, as it turns out, can be strength, silence can be structure, and pressure, when accepted fully, becomes a kind of quiet, radiant support. We are deep now. The water is no longer blue, it is black. But that black is not empty. It is thick with life, and we are ready to keep going. The cold in the deep ocean is not the kind that bites or stings. It doesn't race across your skin or fog up your glasses. It isn't dramatic or theatrical. It doesn't need to be. It's simply there, steady, absolute, undeniable. Below 1,000 metres, the temperature of the ocean settles into an eternal stillness, hovering between 2 and 4 degrees Celsius year after year, century after century. It's not a chill that comes and goes. It's a background truth, like gravity, like darkness, like time when no one is watching. There is no summer here, no spring bloom, no change of seasons, only the cold, wrapped around everything like an old, familiar silence. And yet, life persists. It doesn't just survive, it adapts, changes, slows itself down until the difference between heartbeat and stillness is almost theoretical. In the coldest parts of the ocean, metabolism becomes a kind of art, an exercise in minimalism. Every movement, every breath, every twitch of a fin or flicker of bioluminescence is measured, deliberate, and rare. Like notes in a song stretched out until the spaces between become more important than the sounds themselves. Consider the Greenland shark, an animal so old, so patient, that it might remember a time when Mozart was still composing. These sharks live in the deep, dark waters of the North Atlantic and Arctic, often at depths of hundreds of meters, sometimes deeper still. They are among the slowest moving vertebrates on Earth, and yet they are massive, with adults reaching over 6 meters long. Their heartbeat can drop to 1 beat every 10 seconds. Their swimming speed is leisurely, almost dreamlike, less than 2 kilometers per hour. Their lifespan, scientists estimate they may live for over 400 years, with some individuals possibly born in the early 1600s, long before the invention of the steam engine or the telescope that first glimpsed Jupiter's moons. What grants them such longevity? In part, it's the cold. Low temperatures reduce cellular damage. They slow down everything, from enzyme activity to reproductive cycles. The colder the water, the slower the metabolism, and the slower the metabolism, the longer the lifespan. Time becomes viscous in this environment, stretching out until a decade feels like a breath, and a century feels like a quiet afternoon. The Greenland shark doesn't hurry. It doesn't need to. The ocean has taught it patience, and it's not alone. There are other creatures that move with similar serenity. The black dragonfish, with its sleek, ribbon-like body and needle teeth, swims in the twilight zone of the ocean, where the cold is constant and the light almost gone. It has evolved a set of pigments that allow it to see and emit red light, something almost no other animal down there can detect. In effect, it carries its own invisible flashlight. It hunts in cold darkness using light no one else can see. Then there's the icefish, found in the frigid waters around Antarctica. It has antifreeze proteins in its blood, molecules that keep ice crystals from forming inside its body. Even more remarkably, some species of icefish have no hemoglobin. Their blood is nearly colourless, and their oxygen carrying capacity is extremely low. But in the oxygen-rich cold of the Southern Ocean, they manage. Their hearts are enormous. Their blood volume is greater than that of most fish. They have adapted slowly and perfectly to a world that should not welcome them. What's striking in all of these creatures is not their resistance to the cold, but their embrace of it. They do not fight to be warm. They do not hoard energy or seek shelter from the chill. Instead, they allow the cold to shape them. Their bodies become slower, their reactions simpler, their lives longer. In the warmth of shallower waters, life is fast, colourful and competitive. But down here, in the quiet chill, life is patient. Colour fades, urgency disappears, and instead of speed, you find endurance. Cold changes everything. It changes the chemistry of proteins and the fluidity of membranes. It slows diffusion. It alters nerve conduction. But evolution answers each of these challenges, not with brute force, but with gentle retuning. Enzymes shift shape. Cell walls become more flexible. New proteins evolve to stabilize essential reactions. Organisms trade heat for stability, speed for longevity. In a sense, the cold asks a question, and life answers with softness, with slowness, and with a quiet kind of genius. Of course, to us, such temperatures would be dangerous. Hypothermia would set in within minutes. Our bodies, optimized for a narrow thermal window, would shut down long before we ever reach the abyss. But these creatures have never known anything else. For them, the cold is not a threat. It is the canvas on which their biology has been painted. The ocean, after all, began as a warm place. Billions of years ago, the Earth's waters were hotter, and life began in the heat. But as time passed and ice formed, as tectonic plates moved and continents shifted, the deep ocean cooled, and life followed it down. Not all of it, but enough to remind us that survival is not always about holding on to warmth. Sometimes it's about learning how to live without it. And in that lesson, we find something strangely comforting. We live in a world obsessed with warmth, with growth, with speed, with productivity. But the deep ocean offers an alternative, a world where stillness is success, where slowness is strength, where life blooms not in bursts but in whispers that last for centuries. Imagine a heartbeat every 10 seconds. Imagine a childhood that lasts decades. Imagine hunting in darkness with light only you can see. Imagine growing old, not in years, but in rhythms tied to the slow pulse of a freezing sea. In that imagined stillness, maybe you too can breathe a little deeper tonight. Maybe you can let the cold wrap around you, not to harm you, but to still you. Not to drain your energy, but to remind you that rest has a wisdom all its own. Because down here, in the world below warmth, everything moves slower, but nothing ever truly stops. As we continue drifting downward, wrapped in the hushed cold of the abyss, you might think the world beneath us has grown uniform, nothing but a vast, still plain of freezing black water, stretching endlessly, unchanged and unchanging. But the deep sea, like the sky at night, holds surprises, and just when it seems that the cold has claimed everything, you begin to feel something else, something rising, not sharply, but steadily, a tremble in the silence, a warmth where there should be none. You have arrived at a contradiction. Out of the near-freezing darkness, a chimney appears, towering, jagged, alive. But this chimney doesn't smoke, it vents. It exhales superheated fluid, black as ink and hotter than boiling, into the ice-cold ocean around it. The water streaming from it can reach temperatures over 350 degrees Celsius, but it doesn't boil. Not here. The pressure is simply too great. Instead, this searing heat flows into the surrounding chill, like a dream bleeding into another dream, two opposites meeting but never fighting. These are hydrothermal vents, and they are among the most extraordinary features on our planet. Born where the Earth is broken, along mid-ocean ridges and tectonic boundaries, these vents are places where seawater seeps into cracks in the ocean floor, is superheated by magma beneath the crust, becomes infused with minerals and gases, and is then expelled back into the sea through rocky chimneys known as black smokers. These towers rise from the seafloor like strange breathing sculptures, constantly exhaling, constantly sculpting their own structure with layers of sulfides and iron. What's astonishing isn't just the vents themselves, but what gathers around them. Because around these fiery wounds in the cold earth, life blooms. Not coral reefs, not kelp forests, nothing we'd recognise from shallower seas. Instead, what we find here are alien ecosystems, oases built not on sunlight, but on chemosynthesis. Here, bacteria feed not on light, but on hydrogen sulfide, a gas that, in most environments, would be considered toxic. These microbes, using chemical reactions instead of photosynthesis, form the base of an entire food web, one that supports some of the strangest creatures ever discovered. Imagine a giant tube worm, Riftia pachyptela, standing 2 meters tall, bright red plumes waving from a white chitinous tube. It has no mouth, no stomach, no digestive tract, and yet it lives, fed entirely by bacteria that dwell within its body. These symbiotic bacteria convert the vent's chemical brew into nourishment. The worm provides shelter and access to sulfide-rich water. The bacteria provide food. It is a quiet, seamless partnership, one that thrives without eyes, without movement, and without a single ray of sunlight. Surrounding these worms are colonies of vent crabs, small, white, and blind. Their pale shells and sunless lives give them the appearance of ghosts, scuttling across the rocky surface, grazing on microbial mats or scavenging whatever organic detritus the vents offer up. There are shrimp with light-sensitive patches on their backs instead of eyes, perhaps tuned to the faint infrared glow of the vent water. There are tiny snails with iron sulfide shells, armour forged not by evolution's usual materials, but by the chemistry of the deep. These animals live in an impossibly narrow band of survival. Move too close to the vent and the heat will destroy you. Drift too far into the surrounding water and the cold will claim you. Life here exists in a thin line between extremes, a ribbon of tolerance just wide enough for miracles. And yet, as strange as this world is, it may also be ancient. Some scientists believe that hydrothermal vents could be the birthplaces of life itself, not just for these particular ecosystems, but for all life on Earth. The reasoning is elegant. The vents provide both energy and structure. Their mineral-rich walls offer tiny pockets where molecules can gather, interact and replicate. Their constant heat and chemical gradients create natural laboratories, running experiments day and night, without pause, for billions of years. It is possible, just possible, that the very first living things emerged not in a sunlit pond, but in the crushing darkness of the ocean, beside a vent that looked much like this one. And that idea changes everything. Because if life can begin here, without light, without photosynthesis, without even a clear definition of a boundary between self and world, then it could begin elsewhere too. Not just on Earth, but on other worlds. On Europa, one of Jupiter's moons, where a subsurface ocean may be warmed by tidal forces and sprinkled with seafloor vents. On Enceladus, a moon of Saturn, where plumes of water jet from icy fissures, hinting at heat beneath the surface. To study hydrothermal vents, then, is not just to study biology. It's to study possibility. It's to hold for a moment the idea that life does not require what we once thought it did. It does not require light. It does not require warmth. It does not even require familiarity. It only requires energy, chemistry, and time. And in the vent systems of the deep sea, it finds all three. But vents are not eternal. They rise and fall like volcanoes. They are born from the planet's shifting crust and extinguished when the flow of magma subsides. A vent may last only a few decades before becoming quiet, its community dispersing or dying off. But the ocean is vast. New vents are always forming elsewhere, and the life that depends on them drifts with the currents, seeking the next warmth in the cold. There is something strangely beautiful about that. The idea that in the coldest places on Earth, life exists in pursuit of heat. Not the heat of fire, but the heat of mineral breath, of geologic exhale. Not the heat of sun, but of stone. It reminds us that life is not fragile, it is flexible. It bends toward what is possible, not what is ideal. So here, in this narrow band between freezing stillness and boiling silence, life speaks again. Not loudly, not clearly, but unmistakably, and it says, I am here, I am always here, even in the cold, even in the dark, even in the heat that no one sees. The descent into darkness is not sudden. It doesn't fall like a curtain or switch off like a light bulb. Instead it fades, slowly, gently, like dusk drawn out over 1,000 vertical meters. Each meter deeper is a subtraction, of red first, then orange, then yellow, then green, until only blue remains, hanging on like the final note of a fading song. At around 200 meters below the surface, sunlight begins to dim dramatically. By 500 meters, it's little more than a memory, and by 1,000 meters, it's gone completely. Not dim, not murky, gone. Here, we enter a world where light no longer comes from above, and where life has learned to forget it. The creatures that live below this depth do not expect the sun. They do not wake with its rise or rest with its setting. Their bodies do not reach for it. They have grown, generation after generation, in darkness so complete it almost feels like a substance. Not empty, not frightening, just present, heavy, familiar. For some animals, this world of darkness has meant a letting go. Eyes are expensive to build and maintain. In a place where light never touches, they become obsolete. Slowly over time, some creatures have allowed their eyes to shrink, shrivel and disappear. Vision, once a necessity, fades from the body like a forgotten habit. There are fish here that see with their skin, or sense movement through their lateral lines, faint changes in pressure, the tremble of water displaced by another body. Some worms and crustaceans are completely blind, finding their way by scent and touch alone. Their world is not less than ours, it's just made of different signals. Others, however, have gone the opposite way. In the absence of ambient light, they have reached upward, not physically, but optically. Take, for instance, the barrel-leaf fish. At first glance, it seems like a mistake. Its body is ordinary enough, small, silver, quiet, but its head is transparent, not figuratively, but literally. You can see straight through its forehead like a pane of glass, and inside that dome, like two green marbles floating in jelly, are its eyes. But not just any eyes. These are tubular, highly sensitive structures that point upward, permanently angled to search the darkness above for the silhouette of prey. The barrellet doesn't look forward. It looks to the sky it can no longer see, and it doesn't stop there. Its eyes can rotate, forward, then back up again. It is a creature built to observe, shadows in an unlit world, to search for the merest whisper of motion, the faintest hint of shape, and respond with precision. Then there is the glass squid, with one eye larger than the other. It isn't a deformity, it's a strategy. The larger eye looks up, scanning for dim light from above. The smaller eye looks down, tuned to the bioluminescent signals of other creatures below. It is a squid with a split philosophy, part astronomer, part biologist. In these species, vision has not vanished. It has adapted, reoriented, specialized. Because in the deep sea, light isn't gone, it's just different. Where the sun ends, other sources begin. But that's a story for later. For now, let us linger in this space just below light. This midnight zone, this pelagic layer, where the darkness is ancient and uninterrupted, where even sound seems muffled, absorbed by the pressure and the cold, where the eye, if it could see, would see nothing at all. And yet, here too life waits, not hibernating, not dormant, simply unlit. Some creatures make do with less. They retain small, highly sensitive eyes that can detect the smallest glimmers, a single photon, a flash of movement, the ghost of something passing by. These eyes aren't trying to see the world. They're trying to see what isn't there anymore, like looking for footprints on a floor no one walks across. In other species, the eye itself becomes a trap for light. Widened, curved, glossy, coated with multiple layers of photoreceptive cells. Some fish even have reflective plates behind their retina, bouncing what little light exists back through the eye a second time, doubling their chances of seeing the invisible. Still others, especially in the trenches, abandon the idea of sight entirely. Instead of eyes, they develop long antennae, whiskers, and hairs capable of detecting minute movements in the water, the ripple of a fin, the tremble of another body swimming nearby. In total darkness, sound and vibration become maps, and these creatures read those maps with extraordinary accuracy. They are not blind. They are simply fluent in a different language. One might think of the deep as a place where senses fail, but that would be a mistake. Here the senses sharpen, they specialize, they tune themselves like fine instruments. Not to the world we know, but to the one that actually exists at these depths. Because the deep doesn't care about our kind of seeing, doesn't recognize faces or edges or colour palettes. It is a world sculpted by absence. And in that absence, life has become something astonishing. What's even more remarkable is how peaceful it all feels. This isn't a realm of frantic searching or desperate scuttling. It's a place of patience, of slow encounters, of movements that unfold like sighs, a dance with no music but plenty of rhythm. And perhaps, as we hover here in the quiet, we can begin to understand something of what this place means, not just as a physical space, but as a metaphor. There are places in our own minds, after all, where light doesn't reach, memories buried too deep, emotions too complex to name, fears that live in the corners, not roaring, but breathing quietly. And we don't always need to shine lights into those places. Sometimes we just need to let them be, to let them exist, unseen but still real. The deep sea reminds us that darkness is not the end. It is simply another medium in which life can be written, without flash, without colour, but not without meaning, and not without beauty. So here we are, suspended in the most literal kind of darkness, and still, life goes on. Fish drift, squid pulse, worms ripple through silt that hasn't moved in years. The ocean holds them all, not gently, not harshly, but fully. It is enough. And from this black canvas, something begins to glow. But that is for the next session. If you remain in the darkness long enough, your eyes start to invent things. A flicker here, a movement there, a pattern you can't quite name. The brain, eager for light, begins to see it where none exists. But in the deep sea, sometimes, the light is real. In this world where sunlight has long vanished, where the sky's not black but simply not there, light doesn't disappear entirely. It simply changes hands. It becomes internal, homegrown. Not borrowed from a distant star but generated from within. This is bioluminescence, the power to create light in the dark. And down here, in the deep and quiet sea, it is everywhere. It flashes, it glows, it pulses, it winks and whispers and dances. It can be a lure, a warning, a disguise, or a hello. It is communication without sound, vision without sunlight, art without pigment. It is, in many ways, the only colour left in this place, and it is alive. Bioluminescence is not magic, though it often looks like it. It is chemistry. Inside these creatures, specialised molecules react with oxygen in the presence of an enzyme called luciferase. The result is light, cold, efficient, often blue or green, sometimes red, occasionally purple. No heat, no flame, just a slow shimmer or a sudden burst in the darkness. But the meaning of this light is not in its brightness, it's in its purpose. Let's begin with the anglerfish. You've seen it before, perhaps in cartoons or documentaries, or your own nighttime imagination. A wide mouth filled with transparent needle-like teeth. A dangling lure that glows at the end like a tiny fishing rod growing from its forehead. This glow is no ornament. It is bait. The light drifts just in front of the fish's jaws, swaying gently in the current. Smaller fish, drawn to the glow like moths to a flame, drift closer until the light blinks out and the mouth opens wide. It's a trap, but an elegant one. Some species go even further. The dragonfish, for example, doesn't just produce light, it produces red light. That may not sound unusual until you... Remember that red light is the first to disappear as you go deeper underwater. Most creatures in the deep sea can't see red at all. It's as if that wavelength no longer exists. But the dragonfish can see it, and more importantly, it can emit it, which means it can hunt with a flashlight no one else can detect. Its prey is illuminated but unaware. Imagine walking through a pitch-black forest with night vision goggles, able to see everything while remaining invisible yourself. That's what the dragonfish does. It is the ghost with a lantern no one else can see. Then there are creatures like the hatchetfish, which use their light for the opposite purpose, not to reveal, but to hide. Hatchetfish are narrow, silver, and shaped like their namesake tool. They live in the mesopelagic zone, the twilight region, where faint light from above still filters down. If a predator below them were to look up, it might see the fish's shadow, a dark shape interrupting the last echoes of sunlight. So the hatchetfish glows. It produces a soft light on its underside, matched precisely to the brightness of the water above. This process is called counter-illumination, and it erases the fish's shadow. From below it becomes invisible, a piece of light, not an object. Not absence, but presence. Even invisibility down here is an act of glowing. And not all light is about survival. Some creatures flash to attract mates, sending pulses like Morse code through the black. Others release glowing clouds behind them when threatened, like squid releasing ink. Except this ink shines, a luminous distraction that draws attention away as the animal escapes. The vampire squid, for instance, doesn't hunt aggressively. Instead, when alarmed, it ejects a glowing mucus cloud laced with bioluminescent orbs, each one twinkling like a small swimming star. The predator is confused, surrounded by false signals. Meanwhile, the vampire squid drifts silently away, arms curled over its body like a cloak. Bioluminescence is not just adaptation, it's expression. In a world without colour, it is a palette. In a world without sunlight, it is a voice. Each species speaks its own dialect, blinks, flares, ripples, steady glows. Some synchronise their lights in rhythm with others, some flash unpredictably. Some use light not just as a beacon, but as camouflage, misdirection, even emotional display. What's most remarkable, perhaps, is how diverse and independent this evolution has been. Bioluminescence has appeared dozens of times across the tree of life, in fish, squid, jellyfish, worms, crustaceans, and even fungi and insects on land. It is not a rare trait. It is a favoured one. Nature seems to keep inventing it over and over, as if recognising the profound usefulness of light in the dark. And down here, in the deep, it is the rule, rather than the exception. We often think of light as the thing that reveals, but in the deep sea, it also conceals. It distracts, it deceives, it seduces, it protects, it guides, it connects. It is not the return of sunlight, it is something else entirely, a language, a memory, a way of saying, I am here, and perhaps, don't come closer, or perhaps, come closer, but only if you must. To float through the deep ocean is to drift through a galaxy of the living. Tiny stars that blink once and never again, others that pulse gently for hours, some that explode in clouds of light, then vanish into the shadows. Each one is a message. We just don't yet know how to read them. But the fish do, the shrimp do, the squid with their clever glowing skin do. And they've been speaking in light long before we ever knew they existed. There's something humbling about that. To know that in the darkest places on Earth, life still finds a way to not only endure, but to shimmer. Not because anyone is watching, not because it must, but because it can. And in that shimmer, there is defiance. There is beauty. There is something close to joy. Not all light needs to illuminate. Sometimes it only needs to be. The ocean is often imagined as a place of abundance, endless water, infinite depth, an open sky above. But sometimes, in that expanse, something essential begins to vanish. Not light, though that too fades. Not warmth, that's long gone. What begins to disappear here, in the middle layers of the sea, is something even more fundamental, the breath of life. Roughly between 200 and 1,000 metres below the surface, stretching across much of the world's oceans, there lies a band of water where oxygen becomes scarce. It's called the Oxygen Minimum Zone, or OMZ, and it is one of the least forgiving places for breathing life on the entire planet. You might think the deeper you go, the less oxygen you'll find, but that's not always true. Near the surface, the ocean is stirred by wind and waves, constantly mixing with the atmosphere, absorbing oxygen like a sponge. Down in the deepest trenches near the bottom, cold polar waters sink and carry oxygen with them as they slide along the seafloor. But in this middle band, this still quiet place in between, the water is often stagnant, and here the oxygen disappears. Why? Because life is messy, even when it's small. Microscopic plankton bloom in the sunlit waters above, live brief, luminous lives, and then die. Their bodies drift downward in a slow, steady rain of organic matter, a constant drizzle of decay. As these particles fall, They're consumed by bacteria, which breathe in the process, using up what little oxygen exists. But the waters in this middle layer are not replenished quickly. There's no great churn, no wind to stir the depths, no current to bring fresh air, and so the oxygen is used up faster than it can be restored. What remains is a zone that is not empty, but thin in breath, thin in promise, thin in margin. And yet, as always, life finds a way. To live here, you must learn to breathe where there is almost nothing to breathe. Some fish have evolved hemoglobin, the protein that carries oxygen in the blood, with an unusually high affinity. Their hemoglobin binds to oxygen molecules with desperate efficiency, grabbing every last particle it can find, refusing to let go until the cell itself demands it. Their gills are large and finely structured, optimized not for speed, but for desperation, pulling oxygen from water so faintly laced with it that most other creatures would suffocate. These are not fast swimmers. They do not chase or flee or dart. Their movements are slow, measured, and essential only. Each flick of the fin is calculated, each breath is conserved, energy is a precious currency here, and nothing is wasted. Other creatures go even further. Some invertebrates, such as polychaete worms, have learned to survive for hours, or even days, without any oxygen at all. They shift to anaerobic metabolism, a process that generates less energy, but demands no oxygen. It is a kind of biological dimming, a way of staying alive by accepting a lower flame. There are microbes that have turned this survival into a specialty. They thrive in places with zero oxygen, digesting sulfur instead, or reducing nitrates and iron. Their lives unfold not in bursts of energy, but in long, slow pulses. Like deep drumming beneath still water, they are not fast, but they are consistent. And sometimes that's enough. A few animals have taken the strategy to its quiet extreme. In these breathless waters, there are creatures that pause, not just in motion, but in being. Some species of benthic fish and invertebrates settle onto the seafloor and enter a state of near dormancy. Their heartbeat slows, their digestion stops, their reproductive systems fall silent. They do not move, do not eat, do not think as we understand it. They wait, like seeds in winter, like stories not yet told. In a world driven by growth and motion, this feels almost like death. But it isn't. It is life on hold, a deliberate act of stillness. It's easy to forget that breathing for most animals is not just a reflex, it is a negotiation. Oxygen fuels our engines, but it also creates damage, oxidative stress, aging, inflammation. Living fast, breathing deep, burning brightly, these come at a cost. And in the deep sea, life often chooses the opposite path. It breathes less, it moves less, it waits more. Some fish can survive hours between breaths. Some worms can go days. Some bacteria have never breathed oxygen in their entire evolutionary history. They are not less alive for it, just different. What's most haunting about the oxygen minimum zone is how quiet it feels. Not just because sound doesn't travel well in this stable, unmoving layer, but because everything here is so measured. There is no flurry, no frenzy. Predators and prey alike conserve. They float rather than swim. They drift rather than dart. It's as if the entire region has agreed to keep still, to not waste the breath that isn't there. Even death takes its time here. The dying fish may not sink or rot quickly or be devoured immediately. It may drift for days, slowly descending through the same thin oxygen that failed to sustain it. It becomes part of the rain. It joins the quiet. And yet, this zone is vital. Scientists have begun to realize that the OMZ plays a role in regulating ocean chemistry, carbon cycles, even climate. It is not just a dead space. It's an organ, one that breathes in its own way, through silence, through stasis, through the long, thin patience of life on pause. In a strange way, the OMZ teaches us that stillness is not emptiness. It is strategy. it is adaptation. It is a way of staying alive in a place where survival seems impossible, and maybe that lesson reaches farther than the sea. There are days when oxygen feels thin in our own lives, days when motion is difficult, when energy disappears, when breathing itself feels like work. And on those days, maybe we can remember this place, not as a void, but as a gentle echo of how life continues, even when it slows, even when it stills. Here, in the ocean's quietest lungs, life holds on, not loudly, not brilliantly, but fully. There is a tendency to think of life as motion, a pulse, a heartbeat, a breath in, a breath out. We count signs of life as things that move, waves on a monitor, the rise and fall of a chest, the flick of a tail through water. We look for twitching, blinking, stirring. When something stops moving, we worry it may have stopped being. But the deep sea tells a different story. Here, motion is not the measure of life. In fact, it is often its opposite. Down in the quietest layers of the ocean, where oxygen runs thin and food is sparse and pressure is high, stillness is not a failure. It is a strategy. There are animals here that do not breathe in any way we'd recognise. Their hearts beat once every few minutes, or stop altogether. They do not hunt, forage, or flee. For long stretches of time they do nothing at all, and yet they are alive. Not just existing, but enduring. In the sediments of the ocean floor you can find worms and mollusks that live not in minutes, but in seasons. They burrow into the mud and simply pause. Their cells lower their activity. Their energy production dips to a whisper. They do not sleep. They drift into metabolic silence. It's a kind of patience unfamiliar to us on land. We eat 3 times a day. We breathe constantly. Our hearts beat thousands of times in a single hour. We move, even in our rest. Our bodies expect rhythm, predictability, stimulation. But for these benthic creatures, time is not a rhythm. It is a resource, one they use carefully, stretching it like dough, letting it rise not over minutes but over years. This isn't suspended animation. It isn't magic. It's biology, scaled down to its slowest setting. Some species of deep-sea holothurians, sea cucumbers, may not move for days. Their bodies lie still, soft and gelatinous, barely distinguishable from the silt they rest on. And yet, within them processes continue. Waste is filtered, tissues are repaired, signals are passed, faint and infrequent. Life doesn't stop, it just goes quiet. Even fish, which we often associate with movement, can participate in this stillness. Certain species of abyssal fish, like the cusk eel or grenadier, will remain motionless for hours, hovering or resting along the bottom, conserving energy until the next opportunity for food arrives. An opportunity that might not come again for days or weeks. For some animals, the solution is even more extreme. There are crustaceans and microscopic organisms that can survive anoxia, the complete absence of oxygen, by entering a state of torpor. In this state, the cells themselves slow almost to a halt. Chemical reactions that normally take milliseconds might take hours. Enzymes fold and unfold with the slow rhythm of tides. These creatures don't live in spite of the lack of oxygen. They have shaped their very existence around it. And in some of the deepest, most isolated basins of the sea, there are places where oxygen has been absent not just for years, but for centuries. And still, the sediment pulses, imperceptibly, with microbial life. These organisms, invisible and silent, metabolize slowly, using molecules like sulfate or methane instead of oxygen. They are ancient, durable, content to grow by fractions of fractions. A doubling of population might take 1,000 years. That's still growth. That's still life. We often associate vibrancy with activity, thriving with flourishing. But perhaps life doesn't need to flourish. Perhaps it only needs to continue. There's a kind of grace in that idea, a recognition that persistence is its own kind of brilliance. And there's a gentleness too. Because if we're honest, not all days are bursting with light and laughter. Some days feel like deep ocean layers, quiet, dense, without much air. And on those days, perhaps it's enough just to exist, to breathe slowly, to move rarely, to conserve what we have and wait for a more forgiving current. Stillness is not stagnation. It is not a lack of will. It is not weakness. It is a deliberate pause, a shelter, a held breath that says, I am still here. Sometimes the deepest act of survival is to stop striving, to do less, to lower the volume, to wait with quiet certainty. We see this in the Yeti crab, which lives near hydrothermal vents but must navigate sharp gradients of temperature and oxygen. It perches in place, extending its feathery arms into the flow, cultivating bacteria on its limbs like a farmer tending invisible fields. It does not chase prey. It does not swim far. It stays, calmly, patiently, trusting that the nutrients it needs will come. And perhaps the most poetic expression of stillness comes from the microbes that live in the oldest sediments, miles beneath the ocean floor. They've been isolated from the surface world for tens of millions of years, and yet, when given a small influx of nutrients, they wake up. Slowly, gratefully, as if they had only been resting. Imagine being asleep for 50 million years, and still being capable of beginning again. It reframes what we think time means, what endurance means, what life means. It means you don't have to rush. It means you don't have to bloom brightly to matter. You can live gently, quietly, in cycles so slow they can't be measured by clocks. You can pause for as long as you need, and when you're ready, you can begin again. So here we are, in a part of the ocean where nothing breathes quickly, where motion is rare, where life has chosen to resist the pressure not with force, but with stillness. And it works. Because as the deep teaches us again and again, there is no one shape for being alive. Sometimes it is a pulse, sometimes it is a flicker, and sometimes it is just staying. So breathe gently, move slowly, rest if you need to. Life can wait with you, and it will still call you living. There is snow in the deep sea. It does not sparkle, it does not melt, it is not made of ice. But it falls endlessly, softly, gently, through the water column, from the world above to the world below. It is called marine snow, and for the creatures that live near the bottom of the ocean, it is everything. Marine snow is not a metaphor, though it sounds like one. It is the name we give to the constant drift of organic debris that sinks from the upper layers of the sea to its darkest depths. It is made of many things: tiny dead plankton, the remains of jellyfish, mucus clumps, flakes of fish skin, fragments of algae, grains of feces from passing animals, and the dust of 1,000 daily endings. Everything that once lived above, and now no longer does, begins to fall. It begins as a shimmer, it ends as a whisper. The fall is slow. A single flake of marine snow may take weeks to reach the bottom, drifting downward at a few meters per day, caught in eddies and currents, twirling in the weightless dark. By the time it arrives, it is changed, picked over by microbes, reworked by bacteria, softened, fragmented, but still nourishment. For the creatures that live at the seafloor, these falling remnants are not waste, they are inheritance. There is no farming here, no sunlight, no roots or leaves or grazing herds. Every calorie must fall from somewhere else. Every mouthful is borrowed. Every meal is a gift from gravity. And so, the animals that live here have become connoisseurs of crumbs. Take the sea cucumber. It is not beautiful, not in the traditional sense. Its body is soft, tubular, and slow. It lies along the bottom like a half-inflated balloon. But what it lacks in elegance, it makes up for in patience. The sea cucumber moves with a rolling slowness, grazing the sediment with its feathery tentacles, collecting particles of marine snow 1 grain at a time. Each mouthful is tiny, but it adds up. Over years, over decades, the sea cucumber may filter vast stretches of seafloor, turning the ocean's forgotten remains into new tissue, new motion, new life. It is not a predator. It is a recycler, an alchemist of detritus. Then there is the tripod fish, a stranger shape still. This fish stands upright on the seafloor, balanced on long, delicate fins that stretch down like stilts. It does not swim unless it must. Instead, it perches facing into the current, extending its pectoral fins to catch whatever happens to pass by. Plankton, marine snow, larvae, whatever drifts close enough to touch, the tripod fish is ready. It cannot chase. It does not pounce. It simply waits. And waiting in the deep is often enough. Other animals bury themselves just beneath the surface of the sediment, filtering the water for trace amounts of organic matter. Worms, amphipods, tiny brittle stars, they live in the film between silt and current, harvesting particles too small for the eye to see, yet rich enough to sustain an entire existence. Each one reads the snow like a letter. Each one answers it with life. To live in this part of the sea is to understand the value of small things. A fragment of jellyfish, a piece of drifting skin, a single cell wrapped in protein. What would be discarded elsewhere becomes treasure here. What would be swept away by tide or wind becomes currency. Every flake, every granule is a message from above, and those who live below have learned to listen. Marine snow also connects the surface to the deep, not just physically, but spiritually. It reminds us that nothing truly disappears. Everything we exhale, everything that dies, everything that slips from our hands or falls from our nets will find its way down. And down here, far from sight, it will still matter. Even the snow that is too small to feed a fish can nourish bacteria. And those bacteria can nourish worms. And those worms in turn may feed crabs or eels or other fish that pass through. Life is patient. It builds pyramids from dust. In the deep, hunger is not a crisis. It is a constant. And the animals that live here have evolved to match it. Not with ferocity, but with frugality. They move rarely. They digest slowly. They wait. When food does arrive, when a cluster of marine snow lands nearby, or a piece of carcass drifts down from above, the response is quiet, but swift. Tentacles extend, antennae twitch, mouths open gently, like sea flowers in bloom. No frenzy, just action, immediate and sure. Nothing is wasted. Even excrement has purpose. Even the memory of a fish becomes a banquet. And perhaps, if we listen closely enough, we can hear something in the way these creatures feed. Not desperation, not greed, but gratitude. A kind of slow, dignified acceptance that life, in its most elemental form, is made from other life. And that to live in the dark is to trust that the world above will continue to rain its stories down. The surface ocean is full of drama. Predators chasing prey, coral reefs flashing with colour, waves crashing, suns rising and setting. But the deep sea is different. It is not loud. It does not clamour for attention. It waits, and in that waiting, it survives. So let the snow fall, let it drift. Let it carry with it the weight of things once living, the plankton and jellyfish, the forgotten fish scales, the laughter of light. Let it tumble slowly, day by day, into the mouths of creatures who do not chase, but welcome. And if you ever feel small, or like your actions are lost in the vastness of things, remember that somewhere, deep below, even your smallest breath may one day become someone's meal. Even dust down here is holy. Most meals in the deep sea are small, a fragment here, a flake there. A patient waiting for the snow to fall, for the faintest scent of nutrients to arrive. But sometimes, rarely unpredictably, a banquet descends, enormous, final, sacred. A whale dies. Not with ceremony, not with warning. Somewhere in the open ocean, its heart stops. Its vast lungs release one last breath, and then it begins to fall. The journey downward is slow and silent. The body, once a floating continent of muscle and memory, turns slightly in the current. Bloated, heavy, filled with gases from early decomposition, it may pause mid-water for a while, drifting sideways unsure. But gravity is patient. It always wins. Eventually the body begins its descent in earnest, down past the sunlit zone where blue light still touches fins and scales, down past the twilight zone where fish flash with their own light, down past the oxygen minimum into the black high-pressure depths. The descent may take days, and all the while it is watched. Scavengers follow, sharks, eels, crustaceans. They do not know where it came from, but they recognise what it is. The whale's fall is not just a death, it is an arrival. A rare, tremendous gift to the seafloor, and when it lands, the feast begins. The first stage is chaotic in its own quiet way. Large scavengers, sleeper sharks, hagfish, giant amphipods tear into the soft tissue. They do not speak, they do not compete, but they do not stop. Their mouths work methodically, tearing through flesh that might weigh as much as an elephant. A single whale can provide tens of tons of biomass. For a world that survives on dust, it is as if the moon itself had fallen into a field of grass. Over weeks or months, the soft tissue disappears. Ribs emerge, muscle gives way to bone, but the feast is far from over. Now comes the second stage. Smaller creatures move in. Polychaete worms, many of them newly hatched nearby, swarm the remaining fats. Some species have evolved to specialise in whale falls, organisms that exist for no other reason than to consume what is left when giants die. These worms burrow into the bones themselves, finding sustenance in the oily marrow that lingers there like a final breath. The process is deliberate. The worms do not rush. They live out their entire lives on a single whale skeleton, carving out homes within vertebrae, within the quiet cathedral of ribs. Some reproduce. Others die and fall beside the bones, becoming part of the growing sediment. Over time, a city begins to form. Then, the third stage begins. A stage so profound it feels mythic. Microbes arrive. Bacteria and archaea capable of consuming sulfides released as the organic matter within the bones breaks down. These bacteria form dense mats, clinging to the bones like moss. They are joined by other species, mussels, clams, crabs, that feed not on the whale directly, but on the chemical energy it releases. This final stage can last decades. The whale's skeleton becomes a reef, a foundation, a micro-ecosystem that continues to support life long after the original flesh is gone. Some whale falls have been observed to nourish communities for 50 years or more. 50 years of life born from a single death. And that, perhaps, is what makes the whale fall so deeply moving. It is not just decomposition, it is transfiguration. In life, the whale was already a cathedral of sorts, a creature vast enough to carry stories across the sea, to echo the sounds of the ocean in its bones. But in death, it becomes something even more astonishing, a foundation for other lives, a temple made not of stone, but of sacrifice. Imagine it, a skeleton larger than a subway car resting gently on the ocean floor, ribs arching like the beams of a chapel, vertebrae arranged in careful sequence, each bone sheltering life, each crevice holding breath. There are no hymns sung here, no candles burned, but the silence is holy. You might imagine walking through it, slowly, reverently, seeing crabs picking through sediments that once held lungs, watching worms emerge from eye sockets, glittering in the light of a remote submersible. Above you, a jawbone arches like a ceiling. Around you, fish drift through corridors of bone. Life, passing through life, remembering what came before, and the cycle continues. Eventually the bones dissolve, the oil runs out, the bacteria thin, the sediment reclaims what remains. But for decades, hundreds, perhaps thousands of creatures lived here because a single animal once swam through sunlit waters, took its last breath and fell. And this is not rare, not unique. All across the deep ocean, hidden from view, unseen by satellites and ships, cathedrals like this are blooming and fading every year. Invisible sanctuaries built by accident but tended by evolution. Some scientists believe that whale falls may have been crucial stepping stones for the evolution of deep-sea life. That ecosystems based on vents and seeps may have first colonised the ocean interior through these mobile islands of decay. A whale dies, an island appears, bacteria settle, mussels arrive, worms thrive, and when the bones are gone, some of the life stays behind, rooted now to a floor that once had nothing. There is power in knowing that even endings can be beginnings, that a fall is not the same as a loss, that what we leave behind may nourish more than we ever imagined. So if ever you feel like something precious has ended, something vast and central, remember the whale. Remember that its collapse was not a disappearance, it was a return, a gift scattered, grain by grain, into the waiting mouths of the sea. Not a ruin, but a cathedral. Not silence, but the slow rising of new songs in languages we have not yet learned to hear. In the quiet dark of the deep ocean, where the sun's warmth has never touched, and the pressure would crush the hull of a submarine, something extraordinary is breathing. It does not breathe air, it does not breathe light. It breathes minerals, heat, and stone. Here, on the seafloor, in the rift zones where tectonic plates slowly tear away from each other, the earth cracks open and vents are born. These are not gentle springs, they are hydrothermal chimneys, spewing out scalding water at temperatures that can exceed 350 degrees Celsius. And yet, remarkably, the water does not boil, not because it is cool, but because the pressure is so immense that boiling becomes impossible. At first glance, the scene is otherworldly. Black columns rise from the seabed like stone sculptures, venting columns of darkness into darkness. Thick, mineral-laden plumes that curl and twist like underwater smoke. The minerals in these plumes include hydrogen sulfide, iron, and various trace metals, all leached from the surrounding rock by seawater superheated in the Earth's crust. These minerals would be toxic to most known life, but not here, because here, at the mouths of these searing vents, life thrives. Unlike the ecosystems above that are powered by sunlight, photosynthesis, and green plants, these deep-sea communities run on a different engine, chemosynthesis. At the base of the food chain are bacteria and archaea that harness the chemical energy in the vent fluids, particularly hydrogen sulfide, to convert carbon dioxide and water into organic molecules. Where light cannot go, chemistry takes its place. These microbes coat the rocks around the vents, forming dense mats of biofilm. They drift through the water, settle on the shells of other creatures, and live symbiotically inside the bodies of larger animals. They are the foundation of this ecosystem, not just survivors, but architects of entire communities. One of the most iconic residents of hydrothermal vents is the giant tube worm, Riftia pachyptila. These worms grow in thick clumps, rising like pale candles around the vent's base. They can reach lengths of 2 meters, and yet possess no mouth, no stomach, and no digestive tract. Instead, they house colonies of chemosynthetic bacteria within a special internal organ called the trophosome. The worm supplies the bacteria with hydrogen sulfide and oxygen, delivered through blood so rich in hemoglobin that it runs bright red. In return, the bacteria provide the worm with organic compounds, food generated from stone and gas. It is a partnership without precedent in the world above. Nearby, vent shrimps scuttle along the rocky walls of the chimney, their bodies translucent and their eyes either highly adapted to infrared or entirely absent. blind white crabs, yeti crabs, with bristled arms like feather dusters, wave their claws above the vents to harvest bacterial mats, cultivating them like miniature farmers in a scalding toxic garden. Even fish, ghostly, pale and slow-moving, linger on the fringes, feeding on smaller animals or scavenging remains. There are snails with iron-based shells, mussels with sulfur-oxidizing symbionts, and anemones that sway like pale flames in the vent's current. These creatures are not exotic visitors. They are native. This is their sunlight. This is their meadow. And the vent itself, it is not just a structure. It is a breathing wound in the earth. Hydrothermal vents form where the planet's crust is thin, fractured, and dynamic. As ocean plates spread apart, magma rises and heats seawater that has seeped into the crust. The water, heated beyond boiling and enriched with minerals, is expelled through fissures, forming towering chimneys built up by successive mineral deposits. These chimneys do not last forever. A vent may remain active for a few years or a few decades. Over time, the flow may slow, the temperature may drop, the community may thin. But new vents appear elsewhere, sometimes just meters away, and the life that depends on them has ways of moving, of finding the next breath of stone. Larvae drift in the deep currents, carried vast distances until they sense the chemical signature of a new vent. Then they settle, they grow, a new colony begins. It is a cycle not unlike the movement of nomads, following the breath of the earth, building homes on its most violent exhalations. And all of this chemistry, this life, this unlit abundance, happens in complete independence from the sun. That fact alone is profound. For so long, we believed that sunlight was the foundation of life, that the food chain began with leaves, that without photosynthesis, existence would unravel. But here, in these deep-sea fire gardens, we see another possibility, that life does not need light. It needs energy. Yes, but not necessarily light. It needs structure, chemistry, gradients, time. And when those are present, life appears softly, fiercely, beautifully. In the 1970s, when hydrothermal vents were first discovered near the Galapagos Rift, scientists were stunned. The existence of large animals, sustained entirely by chemosynthesis, rewrote the rules of biology. It forced us to reimagine the range of environments where life might thrive, not just on Earth, but beyond. Because if ecosystems can emerge around vents in the deep sea, cut off from light sustained by heat and minerals, then why not on other worlds? On Europa, one of Jupiter's icy moons, scientists believe a vast subsurface ocean exists beneath a crust of ice. That ocean may be in contact with a rocky core just as our seafloor is. If so, hydrothermal vents could exist there too, and with them perhaps life. The same goes for Enceladus, a moon of Saturn, which vents water vapour and organic compounds into space through cracks near its south pole. These plumes suggest heat, chemistry, potential. In studying hydrothermal vents, we are not just exploring the bottom of our ocean, we're exploring the outer edge of what life can mean. We're standing at the shoreline of other possibilities, and as we peer into the curling plumes of the vent, we do not just see shrimp or worms or bacteria. We see hope. Hope that life is resilient, that it does not cling to light alone, that even in darkness and fire and poison it can bloom, not in spite of those conditions, but because of them. There's a quiet arrogance woven into the way we talk about life. Even when we speak with humility, there is an unspoken assumption that we, the surface-dwelling, sun-dependent, oxygen-breathing creatures, represent the default, that our biology is the template and everything else is a deviation. We call them extremophiles, organisms that live in extreme conditions, as if the conditions themselves are unusual, not the lens we use to judge them. But what if we are the strange ones? What if Earth's more enduring blueprint for life is not the tree, the bird, or the human, but the microbe, not in sunlit forests but in subterranean rock, not with lungs and leaves but with enzymes that function without air, without warmth, sometimes even without a cell wall. Let us descend again, not into the deep sea this time, but deeper, into the rock itself, into the sediment and cracks and mineral seams of the planet's crust. Because even there, life is waiting. Not just bacteria, not just survivors, but vast communities of microorganisms that thrive in acid, in alkali, in brine so dense you could float on it. Microbes that live at temperatures above the boiling point of water. Others that freeze, not in death, but in suspended potential, revivable after thousands of years in permafrost. In the hydrothermal vent fields we just explored, bacteria and archaea flourish at 100 degrees Celsius. Some live at 122 degrees Celsius, the upper limit so far of known life. They build enzymes that don't unravel in heat, proteins that fold into tight coils safe from destruction, cell membranes reinforced with unusual lipids, resisting acid and pressure and flame. Some of these microbes don't even use oxygen. They rely instead on sulfur, iron, or methane. These anaerobic organisms convert chemicals we would find toxic into energy, building sugars from what looks, to us, like poison. There are halophiles, organisms that thrive in salt concentrations that would desiccate most life in seconds. Some turn entire salt ponds bright pink, their pigments absorbing light in places too harsh for algae or plants. Others live inside salt crystals themselves, sealed in tiny bubbles of brine that have not tasted the open ocean in thousands of years. Then there are the acidophils, who dwell in environments with pH near zero, as corrosive as battery acid. Or the alkaliphiles, who live at the opposite end, in caustic soda lakes where most proteins would unravel instantly. And still others, called barophiles or piezophiles, exist only under crushing pressure, deep in the ocean or miles below the surface. To them, what we call normal pressure would be lethally low. They do not merely tolerate their conditions, they require them. Even radiation, which we associate with death and decay, is no barrier. A microbe called Deinococcus radiodurans can survive radiation doses thousands of times higher than what would kill a human. It repairs its DNA with a precision that borders on miraculous. It is, quite literally, difficult to kill. Taken together, these organisms suggest a truth more humbling than we're used to admitting. Life is far more versatile than we imagined. Its rules are not ours. Its boundaries are not defined by human comfort. It thrives in the cracks and extremes, in the hostile and the forgotten, and because of that it may thrive elsewhere. This is why astrobiologists, scientists who study the possibility of life beyond Earth, are increasingly fascinated by these extreme environments, not because they are exotic, but because they are analogues, models for other worlds. Take Europa, one of Jupiter's moons. Beneath its icy shell, hundreds of kilometres thick, lies a liquid ocean, kept warm not by sunlight, but by the tidal flexing of Jupiter's immense gravity. The surface is scarred with fractures, coloured by mysterious dark streaks. Some scientists believe these streaks are salt or sulphur expelled from the depths. If hydrothermal activity exists at Europa's seafloor, it's possible that ecosystems similar to Earth's vents could exist there too, powered not by light, but by chemical gradients, not by forests, but by bacteria. Then there's Enceladus, a small moon of Saturn. It spews geysers of water vapour, organics and salts from fractures near its south pole, cryovolcanoes that hint at a warm, briny ocean beneath. In those plumes, detected by spacecraft like Cassini, scientists have found complex organic molecules as well as signs of potential hydrothermal activity. It is, perhaps, the most promising place in the solar system to search for alien life. But here's the twist. If we do find life there, it might not look all that alien. It might be familiar. Not in shape or behaviour, but in strategy, in chemistry, in patience. It might live in dark cracks. It might use sulfur to grow. It might endure pressure, cold, and silence, not with resistance, but with grace. Because Earth has already written that story. In our deepest mines, we have found microbes that feed on hydrogen stripped from rock by natural radiation, a process that mimics what could happen in the crust of Mars. In underwater lakes beneath Antarctica, isolated from air and sun for millions of years, life still stirs, quietly, deeply. We are not the prototype. We are not the centre. We are one branch of a tree with roots in fire, stone, and salt. And in recognising that, something opens. The idea that life is fragile, rare, and miraculous becomes something broader, gentler, not less beautiful, just less lonely. If life can survive in these extreme niches, it means life is likely, not guaranteed, not simple, but possible in more places than we once dared to dream. It also means that when we look up at the stars, we may not be searching for distant versions of ourselves. We may be looking for microbes, for rock dwellers, for flame eaters, for silent threads of persistence hidden beneath ice, and we may find them. Or we may not. But either way, we now know that life is not a single note. It is a chord, a range, a vibration that echoes through pressure and acid, through fire and void, finding resonance in the most unexpected places. So perhaps, the next time we look in a mirror, we should remember that we are not the baseline. We are one possibility among many, one experiment in a long planetary symphony, and somewhere, perhaps even now, another note is playing, in a crack, in a rock, in a plume of salt and light, not alien, just different, just alive. We've always sent explorers ahead of us, scouts, messengers, tiny extensions of our curiosity. In earlier centuries they were wooden ships with billowing sails. Today they are steel-bodied, cable-bound and lit from within. Their eyes do not blink, their lungs do not breathe. They descend into places where no human heartbeat can follow, and they do so quietly, dutifully, carrying our questions on metal arms and fibre-optic nerves. To reach the deep sea, the true deep, the kind that begins where sunlight ends and keeps going down, we needed more than courage. We needed machines. The ocean, it turns out, is not just a body of water. It is a machine breaker. It crushes, it corrodes, it entangles. At a depth of 10,000 metres, the pressure is more than 1,100 atmospheres, equivalent to having 50 jumbo jets balanced on a single square metre. Every bolt, every seal, every lens must be tested, and tested again. There is no second chance in the Hadal zone, no technician waiting to tighten a valve, no way to run outside and fix the antenna. And yet, we go. We go with ROVs, remotely operated vehicles, lowered by cables from ships above. They glide through the water, their propellers humming faintly, guided by pilots sitting in dark control rooms on the surface. These ROVs carry robotic arms to collect samples, high-definition cameras to film alien-looking creatures, lights that cut through blackness like scalpel blades. But the deeper they go, the more fragile the signal. A delay forms. Movements feel sluggish. Steering becomes a kind of whisper, relayed across kilometres of cable. We go with AUVs, autonomous underwater vehicles, that roam without tethers, programmed in advance. They are more like satellites than submarines, scanning vast stretches of seafloor with sonar, mapping ridges and trenches, sometimes for days at a time, before returning to the surface with their data. They do not transmit, they remember, and their memories shape our maps. And sometimes we go ourselves, inside thick-hulled submersibles like Alvin, the legendary research vessel that first explored hydrothermal vents in 1977 and visited the Titanic in the cold silence of the North Atlantic. Inside Alvin, 3 people can sit for hours, their world reduced to dials and dark portholes, surrounded by a metal sphere no wider than a small car, moving slowly downward into something more ancient than air. The journey is never fast. Lowering an ROV can take hours. The cable must unspool gently, 10 kilometers or more in some missions, sliding down through currents and thermoclines. Every meter deepens the risk. A sudden twist, a bent connector, a pressure seal that leaks. Each dive costs hundreds of thousands of dollars, sometimes millions, just to capture a few minutes of footage or retrieve a single scoop of sediment from a trench that no human has ever touched. But what we find is worth it. We see snailfish hovering above the seafloor like transparent ghosts. We watch crabs with hairy arms waving in geothermal currents. We capture glimpses of glowing siphonophores, their bodies longer than a blue whale, drifting like dreams through water too deep to name. And then, sometimes, we find nothing. Just rocks, just silt, just the humming silence of a place that does not need us. That, too, is a kind of answer. For every triumphant video of a new species, there are hundreds of hours of footage where the camera pans across a flat desert of mud and shadow. No movement, no sound. Just the slow drift of particles in the beam of artificial light, like snow in a dream that forgot what warmth feels like. The engineers who build these machines speak of them like astronauts. Disciplined, hardened, precise. Every part is chosen for a reason. Every wire is tested. The batteries are heavy. The hulls are thick. The margins are thin. The stakes are high. And yet there is something poetic about these machines. They're so human in their way, brave, imperfect, determined. They descend into darkness carrying our hunger to know, our wish to see. They endure pressure, solitude, cold. They fall not like stones but like questions. Sometimes they return with answers, sometimes with silence. We learn to accept both. There is also something deeply humbling in how much of the ocean these machines still cannot reach. We have better maps of Mars than we do of our own seafloor. There are trenches no robot has ever entered, ridges no sonar has ever traced, creatures that flicker just beyond the edge of every camera's light, watching us, or ignoring us, or drifting by in rhythms older than language. And so we send the machines again. Not because they always succeed, but because trying matters. Each descent is a letter dropped into an unmarked mailbox, a message we hope someone, or something, might someday read. The ocean does not reply often, but when it does so in flashes. A new species, a strange behaviour, a sound, a shimmer, a surprise. These machines made of steel and code are not just tools, they're extensions of our wonder. They do not feel cold, but they carry our awe into it. They do not know silence, but they return full of it. They fall and they rise, they fail and they try again. And in their tireless descent into the unseeable, they remind us that exploration is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is slow, heavy, expensive, quiet, but still worthwhile, because even if no one ever sees what they see, even if the light they carry flickers against nothing but silt, they were there, and we, by proxy, by wire, by dream, were there with them. There is a kind of listening that goes beyond hearing, a kind of listening that waits, not for words but for presence, not for clarity but for mystery. The deep ocean invites this kind of listening, because long after the lights go out and the submersibles return to the surface, the ocean continues to murmur, not in human language, not in any grammar we recognise, but in sounds that echo through hundreds of miles of black water, arriving without explanation, fading without resolution. Somewhere beneath the Pacific, a low, powerful hum was recorded in the summer of 1997. It rose, held steady, and vanished. The sound was so loud it was picked up by multiple sensors, thousands of kilometres apart. Researchers at NOAA nicknamed it the bloop. At first, some thought it might be biological, perhaps the call of a creature larger than any known whale. But no one ever found the source. Later models suggested the sound resembled the cracking of an ice shelf, but no camera confirmed it. No ice was seen, only that single, strange resonance in a place where silence should have ruled. It is not alone. Other signals, upsweep, slow down, Julia, have appeared and disappeared over the decades. Some repeat, others do not. Each one is haunting in its simplicity, a curve of pitch, a drop in tone, a pulse in the water. Some last only seconds, others stretch for hours. Their origins remain uncertain. They might be tectonic, they might be thermal, or they might be something else. Listening in the deep is not just an act of data collection, it is a form of wonder. Hydrophones, underwater microphones, are scattered across the oceans, some anchored to the seafloor, others to drifting. Buoys. They record constantly, hour after hour, picking up the songs of whales, the chatter of shrimp, the grind of shifting plates, the quiet churn of distant storms. And among these known sounds, they occasionally catch a fragment of the unrecognised, a question shaped in sound. And though we may never learn the meaning, the asking itself is enough. In recent years, a new kind of listening has joined the effort. Instead of ears, we use genetic memory. A drop of seawater contains the traces of everything that has passed through it. Bits of skin, mucus, cells, secretions. From these fragments, we can extract environmental DNA, or eDNA. With eDNA, we no longer need to see a creature to know it was there. We do not need to catch it, or photograph it, or lure it with bait. We only need to collect water. A litre is enough. Then, with sequencers and databases, we match the strands of DNA to known species. Some matches are perfect: cod, squid, plankton, sharks. Others are partial, familiar but not exact. And then, sometimes, we find sequences that match. Nothing. No record. No species. No name. Only the silent trace of something living. Something that swam through this place. Something that shed skin, exhaled, brushed against the current, and left a molecular echo in the dark. The more we look, the more of these echoes we find. This is not surprising. Scientists estimate that as much as 2/3 of life in the ocean remains undescribed. Some say 90%. The numbers shift, but the message is constant. The ocean is full of creatures we have never seen, and many of them may never be seen. They may be too small, too elusive, too deep, but they still leave whispers behind, and we have learned to listen for those. This kind of listening, through sound, through DNA, through silence, is slow work. It requires patience, funding, calibration, and a willingness to be unanswered. But it also requires faith. Faith that what we do not yet understand is still worth seeking. Faith that mystery is not a failure, but a feature. Faith that listening in itself is valuable. There is something deeply human about this kind of listening. It is the same instinct that makes us lean toward the edge of a forest, waiting for a bird to call. The same stillness that settles in a chapel when the last note has faded, a space held open in case something more arrives. We often think of exploration as movement, launching ships, diving deep, collecting samples. But sometimes the most profound exploration is stillness. A microphone anchored in place, a buoy drifting silently, a bottle of seawater held up to a beam of lab light. No chase, no conquest, just attention. To listen is to say, I am here, I am ready. I know you might never answer, but if you do, I'll be listening. And sometimes the ocean does answer. A new whale song is heard, in frequencies just beyond our usual range. A strange rhythm, unlike any pod we've recorded. A deep note, followed by a pause, then a clicking crescendo. We triangulate. We wait. The song returns. It matches nothing we know. A new clan, perhaps. A new species. or simply an old one that learned a new song. Other times, the answer is in the Dardan. A cluster of eDNA sequences appears in a trench we've never visited. The pattern is clear. Something lives there, many somethings. But what they look like, how they move, what they eat, we still don't know. Still, we celebrate. Because each unknown is a thread, and enough threads form a presence, a kind of shared breath, stretched across depth and time. When we first launched satellites, we pointed them outward, to the stars. But when we first placed hydrophones into the ocean, we pointed them inward, into a world below us, a world wrapped in salt and pressure and silence. And what we learned was that this world is speaking. Not constantly, not clearly, but enough. And now we know. The ocean is not silent. It is full of quiet conversations we have only just begun to translate. Not all of them will make sense. Not all of them are meant to. Some are sighs of shifting rock. Some are the footfalls of crabs. Some are the slow dissolving of bubbles in vents a mile below. Some are voices in a language too old for syllables. And still we listen. Because somewhere in that static, in that tremble, in that strand of DNA, might be the next chapter of life on Earth, or the first chapter of life beyond it. The deep sea has always felt distant, protected somehow by its very difficulty. It is not easy to reach, not easy to study, not easy to change, and so for most of human history it has remained untouched. Not by reverence perhaps, but by inconvenience. But inconvenience does not last forever. In recent years, our technology has begun to catch up with our ambition, not just to explore, but to extract. Far below the waves, in places that have never known sunlight, lie metallic nodules, cobalt-rich crusts, and sulfide deposits, geological formations formed over millions of years, layer by patient layer. They contain materials critical for modern electronics: lithium, nickel, cobalt, rare earth elements. And now, slowly but surely, companies and nations are preparing to retrieve them. The term is deep sea mining, and it sounds at first like science fiction. Massive machines crawling across the ocean floor, robotic arms scooping nodules from the sediment like pebbles, slurry pipes sucking minerals upward to waiting ships, a seafloor reshaped, not by geological forces, but by gears and contracts. But the sea, especially its depths, is not a blank canvas. It is not an empty vault. It is not a bank waiting to be emptied. It is an ecosystem, ancient and unhurried, whose timelines do not match ours. What appears as a flat plane of mud to the camera is, in fact, a living tapestry, home to sea cucumbers, brittle stars, ghostly urchins, and invisible microbial colonies that form the base of local food webs. Even the nodules themselves, those metallic stones, are habitat. Animals live on them, cling to them, graze their surfaces. Some species lay eggs there, others rest beneath them, protected from current and predator alike. Remove the nodules, and you remove a century of growth in an instant, because that is how long it takes them to form. Centuries for a single stone, and once disturbed, the sediment clouds, billowing into plumes that can smother nearby organisms, clog filter feeders, and scatter fine particles across kilometres of sea floor. The deep sea is not equipped to recover from this kind of disturbance. Its currents are slow, its regeneration is slower still. A scratch made by a mining machine today may remain visible 100 years from now like a scar in stone, and yet there is pressure. Above the surface, the demand is rising for phones, for batteries, for solar panels, for the materials we hope will move us toward a greener world. There is an irony here, that in our pursuit of sustainability, we may destroy one of Earth's least understood, least resilient environments. It is not that the technology is evil, it is that the ecosystem is vulnerable. And so, many scientists are asking for caution. A pause, a time to study, to assess, to understand what might be lost before it is taken. The International Seabed Authority, a body tasked with managing the seafloor beyond national borders, faces growing pressure to approve contracts, regulate operations, and define what constitutes irreversible harm. But in the meantime, exploration licenses are already granted, test sites are already mapped, and some companies are already testing machines, dragging metal across sediment that has never been stirred by wind or wheel. We are not standing on the edge of destruction, but we are approaching it. And perhaps that is the moment to ask ourselves, what is the value of the deep? If we measure it only in metals, we miss something vital. The deep ocean is not only a source, it is also a sanctuary, a place where evolution has taken forms unknown elsewhere. A place that humbles us with its patience, its slowness, its silence. A place where life does not rush, or boast, or bloom with colour, but endures. We have spent 2 hours now in its presence. We have seen creatures that glow without purpose, that drift without fear. We have listened to vents that breathe fire, to machines that fall silent, to genes that whisper of lives unseen. We have learned that existence can be gentle, and that meaning can emerge even in darkness. And now, just as we begin to understand how rare and strange and beautiful this world is, we may alter it. Perhaps that is the final question the deep asks us. Can you recognize value that cannot be extracted? Can you protect something not because it serves you, but because it exists? In the deep ocean, life unfolds slowly. It does not respond to deadlines. It does not recover quickly. It does not shout, but it matters. It matters not because it glows or swims or sings, but because it is. And sometimes that is enough. So here we are, at the quiet end of a long descent. From the sunlit ripples at the surface to the black stillness of the seafloor, you followed the path all the way down, through cold, through pressure, through silence, past the glowing eyes of dragonfish and the mineral breath of underwater chimneys, past bones that bloom into cathedrals and machines that fall into darkness carrying only light and wire and curiosity. This is the deep. It is not a destination. It is a state of being. And now, in these final moments, as your breath softens and your body sinks deeper into stillness, we can let the story fade gently, like light fading with depth, like footsteps slowing in silt, not ending but dissolving into something softer. You have learned perhaps that in the ocean nothing moves quickly. The deepest parts of it are not about action. They're not about striving. They're about endurance, about existing at the edge of pressure, in a place where the world does not watch, and yet life still finds a way to unfold. You do not need to shine to matter. You do not need to race to survive. You do not need to chase the surface to be complete. Think of the snailfish hovering weightlessly just above the ocean floor with no swim bladder, no hurry, or the giant tube worms who live without a mouth or stomach, depending entirely on quiet partnerships within, or the cucumber, slowly feeding on falling particles, cleaning the floor of the world with patient grace. Their lives are not performance, they are not spectacle, they are proof that being alive does not always mean moving forward, that to float, to wait, to breathe in the dark and do no harm is also a way of being. And perhaps that's something we forget on land, where everything moves quickly, where brightness is equated with value, where urgency fills our lungs like smoke. But here, in the deep, that smoke clears. Here, there is no calendar, no deadline, just slow water, just drifting snow, just the creak of the earth's bones and the occasional sigh of a creature you'll never meet. Let yourself sink into that rhythm. Let yourself become the water. Feel the current pull, not strong, not sudden, just enough to guide you like breath between thoughts. Just enough to remind you that you are still in some quiet way connected to everything else that drifts and floats and rests. Because the truth is, You are part of this story. The water that makes up most of your body once passed through oceans like this, through ancient seas, through plankton, through vapour and cloud and rain and river and rain again. You carry within you the same molecules that flowed across the gills of prehistoric fish, that steamed from vents 4 billion years ago, that froze in comets and returned in tears. You are not separate from this world. You are its memory, its echo, its continuation. When you breathe slowly now, you breathe the breath of things that once glowed and fell and rose again. Every inhale is a link. Every exhale is an offering. And like the sea, you don't need to be loud to be important. You don't need to be seen to be real. You don't need to be known to be whole. The deep teaches this best. That sometimes the truest version of rest is letting go of movement, of brightness, of the pressure to become something else. Letting yourself be held as the ocean holds its life, as the dark holds the light, as silence holds the sound of breathing, faint but steady. So as we close this descent, let it not be a goodbye. Let it be a stillness. Let it be a return. Back to yourself. Back to a rhythm slower than the clock can count. Back to the gentle truth that being here is enough. No transformation required. No glow necessary. No answer demanded. Just you. Floating like marine snow. Waiting like an unmapped trench. Breathing like the vents beneath continents. Living like the things no one has ever seen, but that still leave traces in the water. And maybe, just maybe, that's all life ever needs to be. Not finished, not solved, just felt, just held, just now. Sleep well, Voyager, wherever you are, above the waves, below them, somewhere between dreams and wakefulness. May you carry a little of the deep with you, a little of the pressure that reminds you you're real, a little of the darkness that needs no fear, a little of the silence that offers comfort, not absence. We've reached the bottom, now rest.